Hi everybody, this is a video review of a Reeve small Sebenza 21. I've been running the everydaycommentary.com blog for about a year now, and I've done 50 written reviews. I've decided maybe it's time for me to do a video review. So really this is an update of the the written review that I did of this knife about a year ago, and I developed a system that I hope is useful for judging gear, and it uses a 20-point system, and essentially there's 10 categories. I'll go through the categories one at a time, and an item can get a 0, which means it doesn't work, a 1, which means it works, and then a 2, which means it works really well, in each of the 10 categories for a total of up to 20 points. This knife I gave a 20 out of 20, and I'm going to explain to you why. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about what each category means, and then tell you what I gave it in that category, and whether, if a year later, it still deserves the score that I gave it. So the first category that I always look at is the design, and by design I just mean what the knife looks like if you were to just sort of put it on blueprint on paper, not what it looks like in person. And so the idea here is that you just want to have a really clean or useful design. You don't want to have things that are unnecessary, or, for example, you don't want to have liners that rub, or in my mind, I always like to have a lot of blade in the handle, and you can see here that the blade goes really close to the end of the handle. It's sort of like getting free blade length. Why would you not want more if you could have it? I understand that there are certain tactical applications, like the Yojimbo Spyderco, where you probably don't want more blade handle, or more blade in the handle. You need the big handle for specific reasons. But in an everyday carry knife, my philosophy is the more blade, the better. So you want a blade to handle ratio that's close to 1. And in the written review that's on my site, you can see the blade to handle ratio, which I don't have off the top of my head. And that's one of the signs that I look for in a knife, in terms of whether it's a good review or whether it's a good design or not. The other thing that's really nice about this knife, and this is sort of like the trademark of this knife, is the lock. The lock is a frame lock, everybody knows that. And the frame lock basically takes the handle slab and gives it a second purpose. In addition to being a place to put your handle, or your hand, it gives you a place, it gives the blade something to lock the cutting portion into an open position. And so that's a really ingenious idea. You get 2 uses out of 1 part, and every time you can do that, I like it. The other thing that's really nice and sort of different about the Sebenza pocket knife is the pocket clip. And the pocket clip is sort of a double dip pocket clip, and I found that in carrying this knife for a year, and I do carry it, and you can see there that there's a lot of scratches on the handle. I do carry it, and I do use it, and I do like it, that the double dip pocket clip is probably about as good a pocket clip as you'll find. It's not super deep carrying, because it'll cut off right about there, and you probably see that much sticking out of your pocket. But the fact that it's a matte finish means it blends in real well with blue jeans, and the fact that it's a double dip pocket clip means that it's almost impossible to pull it out by accident. You're going to hit that first dip on the lip of the pocket, and then the second dip on the lip of the pocket. And so by the time you get that second dip, you'll probably notice. So in terms of design, I gave this knife a 2, so the best possible score. The next category that I always look at is fit and finish, and by that I mean how the design was implemented. How did they take it from paper and put it into reality? And here, like, this is the thing that makes this knife a $330 knife. The fit and finish is really excellent. The blade is really thick, and it centers just about perfectly. You can see there that it's really close to perfect. It never rubs, even though it's really close. Maybe 2 or 3 pieces of paper thickness away from one of the liners. It never rubs. The handle, the blade comes out of the handle nice and smooth. There's no hitches in the pivot mechanism. There's no places where it's either really loose or really tight. It uses a bushing pivot system so that you can tighten it down all the way and it'll still move. The other thing that I think is a really nice feature is that the place where the lock bar interfaces with the back tang of the blade. So that point right there, Chris Reeve decided to carbonize the end of the lock bar, and by doing that, he's given the titanium an extra degree of hardness, which really helps because the steel in this knife, the S30V steel, is pretty tough steel, and titanium, while tougher than aluminum, is definitely not tougher than that. So you don't want the lock bar to get mushed or marred in a way that makes lockup less secure. And you can see I've had this knife for a year, and it's just about halfway. So I would imagine that given that it started out close to where it is now, that I'll get a lot of nice use out of this knife. So in terms of fit and finish, I also gave this knife a 2. I mean, I own probably 40 pocket knives. I've played with hundreds, and including custom knives, this is about as nice a fit and finish as I've seen. The next thing that I usually talk about in the review is the blade steel. And this version is not the latest version, and it uses S30V blade steel. And S30V blade steel was designed by Crucible Steels, and it was designed to be a cutlery steel. So unlike a lot of other steels that start out as ball bearing steels or leaf spring steels, this steel was designed specifically for knives. And while it's not the hardest steel out there, I think that one of the hardest steels that you can get on a regular basis is ZDP 189. It does hold a pretty decent edge. It is noticeably better than the VG10 steel that Spyderco runs in most of its mid-range knives, and it is closer to the ZDP 189. It is not ZDP 189 though. It will need resharpening. I think I've resharpened this knife after pretty regular use, maybe 4 or 5 times in the year. I have a bunch of knives that I carry, so this one is not the only one that goes in my pocket. It's the one that I like to carry most often, that or my Dragonfly 2 in ZDP 189. But it does need resharpening more often than the ZDP 189, and significantly less than the VG10. I have noticed that since it's not all that hard, I think they harden it somewhere to a 58 or 60 on the Rockwell scale, that you can't really get that really steep secondary bevel, or the cutting edge can't be really steep. That's one of the benefits of having a really hard steel, is because it's harder, you need less material at the edge, which means you can make the bevel steeper, and the steeper the bevel, the better slicer it is. This knife, however, is still one hell of a slicer given how thick it is, and it is a pretty thick blade. I mean, you compare it to a Delica, and it looks like it's twice as thick. The other thing that I really like, so in terms of the steel, I gave it a 2 out of 2 for the S30V. It's not the best and the best of the best anymore, but it's still really good. The new versions run S35VN, which is supposed to be the next generation of steel. If you look at my website, I did an article on S35VN, and basically the secret ingredient is an element called niobium, which allows them to harden it and heat it at a higher level. It's a metal that they use in rocket boosters so that they can withstand the heat. The deployment method, how the knife comes out, you use a thumb stud, and I really hate thumb studs. I just think that they're kind of like a wart or a pimple on the blade. And as nice as this one is, the blue anodized, it's probably the best thumb stud I've ever had. In fact, it's not probably, it is the best thumb stud I've ever had, but still a thumb stud. For its use, it does fine. It does actually quite well. And I think that's because the thumb stud's placed well. There's a nice scoop here in the handle so you can get to it, and the pivot works well. So I gave it a 2 out of 2. But if I was going to improve this knife, the one place I would improve it is the deployment method. I would give it a flipper. I'd give it a flipper right there. Nice, easy deployment. They have the ability to do the flipper because this is an open constructed blade, meaning there's nothing on the spine that covers up the blade. Put a little flipper there, and this knife would be even better than it is. I don't think you could do a hole or an oval, because the knives, one of the nice things of this knife is it's really thin. The blade is almost entirely, the thickness of the blade is almost equal to the thickness of the knife. You get a lot of blade packed in here, but it's still nice and thin to carry, much thinner than a Spyderco, especially a Spyderco of the same length, because you have that big hump for the hole. I love the Spyderco hole, but not like this. I like the thinness of the blade, and because of that, I'm willing to accept the thumb stud, even though I think a flipper would be better. So I gave that a 2 out of 2. The lock is the lock that Chris Reeve designed, the frame lock, and it works really well. I mean, it does everything it says. All of its fans say it does. It does it really well. When you hold the blade, you're actually reinforcing the lock, which makes it a little better. Gave that a 2 out of 2. That's kind of a no-brainer. In terms of blade shape, I like EDC knives that have a nice belly. This part right here, the big curve. It gives you more cutting edge with less length because you have curves in there. It also gives you something to roll through on cuts, and by rolling through on the cut, you get a little bit more performance. I like that. I like the fact you don't have to sharpen it. So I gave that a 2 out of 2. The grind, this is a hollow grind blade, and it's a relatively high hollow grind. It goes about 3/4 of the way up the blade. It is not a flat grind blade, and there are people who think, and probably rightfully so, that the flat grind blade is the way to go. I don't necessarily agree. I think you can do a really good hollow grind blade. In this case, the Chris Reeve Sebenza is proof of that. This is a great slicing knife. I gave the grind a 2, and I gave the blade shape a 2. The retention method, the way that the knife is, attached to your body or attached to your bag, like I said, I love this clip. This is probably my favorite clip. Real simple, real elegant. The matte finish is nice. It doesn't show off. It doesn't tell everybody you have a pocket knife on you. So I gave that a 2 out of 2. Grip, how this knife feels in your hand when it's deployed. The little cutout here to get to the thumb stud gives you an extra place to sort of hold your knife, hold your fingers on there. There's jimping on the top. It gives you a good place to register your thumb. You can hold it in multiple grips. It works well. I gave it 2 out of 2 there. Carry, the last category. How does this knife feel when it's in your pocket? Not how does it attach to your body, but is it unobtrusive? Is it easy to get to? And the thinness, the fact that this isn't some fat, wide blade, even though the blade itself is quite wide, that makes a difference. The fact that it's thin in this dimension is really nice too. And then the beautiful double dip pocket clip. All of these things make this one of the nicest, most unobstructed knives to carry. You can put this in your pocket and you can still carry your phone in there. You can still carry your keys in there, although I wouldn't recommend it. That's how I got some of those scratches. It's just a great knife to carry. So I had this knife for more than a year now. I got it for Christmas 2 years ago. And in the year plus that I've had it, I put some scratches on it. I've sharpened it a couple times. I didn't clean it before I did this review. I have to say that it did everything to earn the 20 out of 20 score, and if I had to do it again, I'd give it the same score. It has great steel, it has a great grind, it has a great blade shape, the lock is really nice, the overall design is great, the fit and finish is pretty much without peer in the production world, and the retention method is just amazing. The deployment is quite nice, excellent in fact for a thumb stud. The grip is great. The carry is great. I mean, I just don't have a whole lot of complaints about the way this knife works or fits in my pocket. I don't have any complaints about how it cuts either. And so, for that reason, I give the Chris Reeve Sebenza 20 out of 20. It's not exactly a perfect knife. I'm not going to say it's a perfect knife. I think that the Spyderco Dragonfly 2 and ZD.189 is probably as close to a perfect EDC knife as you're going to get, unless you have somebody build it to spec for you. This knife would be perfect if it had a flipper. I think I could say that. But it's still one hell of a knife, and for the amount of money that you're paying, you are getting the quality. I mean, there are people that beat the hell out of this knife on the internet. You can take a look at Neptune Knives, and he'll show you how to break this knife. But unless you're trying to break it, it's going to be there for you for the next 10 years, probably the next 20 years. I'd really like to give this knife to my son. It's a great knife. And I hope you enjoyed my first video review.